Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, we'll have the story and details surrounding a fatal officer-involved shooting in Hoopa. Also, is the state finally getting serious about affordable housing? We interview Nezzie Wade from AHHA Humboldt to discuss her work, homelessness, and a new effort to provide affordable housing projects and easier environmental review. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. The California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, has been a major issue for decades. In the state of California, all proposed developments have to adhere to the stringent standards put forth in the California Environmental Quality Act, one of the strictest rule sets in the nation. Developers and their allies often point to this California law as a special case of regulatory overreach, and they ascribe many of the development and housing supply and affordability issues in the state to what they consider are its overzealous standards. California does have strict environmental rules, and CEQA does have a long list of specific constraints that it puts upon developers in order to better control their potential developments and, more importantly, their impacts on the environment. That the state legislature recently voted to suspend some of the CEQA hurdles for affordable housing projects shows just how dire the situation is getting and demonstrates the state government's determination to get some projects moving. For poor to moderate income Californians, rents have gone way up and creep ever higher, while home prices have exploded and have therefore left many folks out of luck in terms of home ownership. For the homeless, it makes the prospect of getting back on your feet that much more intimidating and difficult. For the interview tonight, we speak with Nezzie Wade from Affordable Housing Homeless Alternatives to talk about her organization, the work it's doing, and how this new change to CEQA might help. But first, let's grab some headlines. A man was shot and killed by a California Highway Patrol officer in Hoopa last Sunday, September 17th, and the case is now being investigated by the Humboldt County Critical Incident Response Team, along with the State Department of Justice. At around 7:30 a.m. that morning, a CHP officer and a sheriff's deputy were watching traffic on State Route 96 when they spotted a Volkswagen Jetta sporting a broken windshield. They also alleged that the driver was not wearing his seatbelt and that some lights on the car were not working. When the CHP officer tried to make a stop, the Jetta refused to yield, and the officer began his pursuit, with the deputy following. Only a quarter-mile away, the Jetta pulled into a turnout, and its driver fled the vehicle and took off down a nearby trail into the woods. After a foot chase that lasted for some 200 yards, the two got into a violent altercation. Details remain under investigation, but the response team is reporting that it appears the officer deployed his taser before shooting the suspect. The driver, who has not been named, suffered several gunshot wounds and died at the scene. The officer sustained serious head injuries and a bite wound. He was taken to a local hospital for treatment. Back at the Jetta, the sheriff's deputy contacted two adult female occupants. Both women were detained, questioned, and released as part of this investigation. The Humboldt County Critical Incident Response Team is led by the Sheriff's Major Crimes Division and the Humboldt County District Attorney's Office. During their preliminary investigation, investigators determined the decedent did not have any weapons on him. But during a search of the Jetta, investigators located a loaded firearm, drug paraphernalia, and an open container of alcohol. The driver's identity will be released following a forensic autopsy. The name of the involved officer and the number of rounds fired will be released as soon as it can be without compromising the investigation. The CHP officer was not equipped with a body camera. As long as we're on the subject of potentially deadly, despicable crimes, we wouldn't want to leave Eureka out. Eureka police said this week that they want someone in connection with the homicide that occurred on August 2nd. According to Eureka police, at around 6:30 p.m. that evening, officers with the Eureka Police Department responded to a West Sonoma Street address after a call reporting a fight. Upon arriving, officers found 27-year-old Holland Elbick in medical distress. She had sustained multiple injuries as an alleged result of a physical altercation between Elbick, roommate Destiny Ramey, and a male friend of Ramey. Elbick died of her wounds, and police are claiming she was stabbed repeatedly to death. An arrest warrant for Ramey has been issued. She is described as a 20-year-old woman, 5 feet 6 inches tall, with dark hair and blue eyes. If you have information on her whereabouts, you can call the Eureka Police Department at 441-4044 or dial 911. Police are asking that people not attempt to contact or apprehend Ramey, as she is considered armed and dangerous. North Coast Congressman Jared Huffman went viral this week when an exchange he had with fellow Congressman Doug LaMalfa, Republican of Chico, caught people's attention. The fallout from this exchange, which happened during a hearing with Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, included a rolled scroll Dear John letter from one congressman to the other. LaMalfa took umbrage to Huffman's joke, which you're about to see, and so delivered the scroll to announce that he was pulling his name off legislation that the two had been pushing together, a measure to remediate toxic marijuana growth damage on National Forest System lands.
What I can tell you is that climate change is real. We got to do something about it.
Yeah, this one's called autumn, sir. So
I'm sorry?
This one's called autumn right now, so yeah.
I'm sorry, I couldn't make out what you said, sir.
This climate change right now is called autumn, yes.
Yeah, that's the seasons changing, which respectively is not the same thing as the climate changing. And as somebody who is hoping to retire in the 2050s and who has kids who will be old enough to ask me as they're getting to their 30s, whether we did enough to deal with climate change or whether we just did what was convenient, I take that really seriously.
Reclaiming my time, thank you, Mrs. Secretary. The trillions and trillions we're going to cost our kids to chase a tiny percentage of CO2 will bankrupt all of us, and bankrupt our economy, and ship it to China for all the other reasons. So I yield back, Mr.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Huffman.
Mr. Secretary, it's good to see you. You can see that I serve here in Congress with some of the greatest minds of the 19th century.
The 19th century, thus the rolled scroll and the Dear John letter between Congress members, apparently. I'd like to welcome Nezzie Wade to the show to talk about her organization, AHHA Humboldt. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So can you first describe what AHHA Humboldt is and what its work entails for advocating for the homeless, correct?
Okay. Well, AHHA, first of all, stands for Affordable Homeless Housing Alternatives. I know it's a mouthful. That's why AHHA seems to work for us and for everybody else.
And it's also, like you said, a good idea, right?
It is. It's a good idea. It's always been a good idea. It's been a real challenging one and an uphill struggle to try and implement these kinds of models, but it is extremely important. AHHA was founded in 2014. We, a small cluster of people, co-founders Deborah Carey, who is now in retirement and well-deserved, and Jim Paquin, who has passed away, and myself were the co-founders, and with a small group of people in 2014 decided we would become AHHA and strive to be a nonprofit, and we, as our first goal, brought Andrew Heben here from Oregon, from Opportunity Village, which is the primary model we've been trying to implement here in California, which is a micro-house village co-managed by residents and a nonprofit. And our vision is that every person has a right to a safe, legal place to live. Yeah. And from there we developed a mission, which is to provide information, education, direct services, and advocacy, as well as public policy development for affordable alternatives. And that's by working with cities, counties, all kinds of individuals and advocates, organizations, to make that happen by partnering with them.
And so your plan is to, the idea is to build housing and provide like a centralized location where these developments might be and provide cheap housing for folks.
It would be a, oh, I see our little house.
Yeah.
It would be a communal setting, which is what makes it affordable, hence affordable housing. And residents would be responsible for managing the environment along with a nonprofit. They would have their own organization for decision making and for bringing things forward, creating the agreements that are necessary to live together and create community. So we're more about community development than we are, quote, the traditional understanding of what housing development is. Yeah. Although it's important for us to be working with housing developers because we have to have a continuum of housing. We're talking about just the first entry-level opportunities for people to become stabilized from homelessness. Yeah. And from there, after a period of time of healing and health and building equity and getting the support services and things that are needed, they can move on to other opportunities.
Is that a housing first model? Isn't that where you house people first before you begin the process of trying to rebuild?
It is a housing first model. It's very low barrier. That's the point. A lot of the opportunities that people have are not low barrier. They have to meet certain requirements. Affordable housing, as we understand it, is really something that isn't all of this information about affordable housing is really not addressing the people that we are trying to create alternatives for.
Yeah.
Because most affordable housing projects have eligibility requirements. You have to have so much income to get in, and you can't go beyond a certain point. And for a lot of people, they can't simply take advantage of that. It has to be subsidized, and subsidized housing is not sustainable.
Yeah.
I mean, the costs are passed on to all of us, but that's what we have now. And as long as the state continues to make those opportunities available, we're going to keep trying to do affordable housing. And we need housing, but we also need, even with this affordable housing, I was reading in an article that from the Housing Coalition, the Low Income Housing Coalition, that says, if with all of these, with mixed income housing and the housing opportunities now, that we might get 1 to 6 or 2 to 4 million homes in California, including 300 to 400 income restricted affordable homes that would be for people of extremely low income, but still, that is a very small number in comparison to the need and the affordability issue.
Yeah.
So.
Now, if we can go back to 2014 when you guys started the group,
Yeah.
if I'm correct, that was around the time that the Devil's Playground issues were going on. And I was struck at the time that Eureka and the Bay Area of Humboldt County had a habit of basically herding groups of homeless people around. I mean, I remember when I first sort of became aware in Humboldt County, there was a lot of people living out on the South Jetty.
Yeah.
They were moved out of that area for an environmental cleanup, which I understand, but a lot of those people then moved into the Bayside area behind the mall, and then that eventually ended up evolving into the Devil's Playground. They moved those folks out. Now some of them are over by the slough. There's never a real solution in terms of providing a permanent place for these people to stay. Betty Chin has provided some locations, and there's a shelter, and there's other opportunities. But like you're saying, you're hoping, it sounds like, to establish a permanent site that is livable and clean and managed by, in some sense, by the people who are living there themselves.
Yeah, with oversight, or it was not oversight, but with partnership. Sure. from us and a lot of other people that are organizations that are very interested in the people themselves and creating community, because it improves the community for everyone, for people to be stable and have an opportunity to thrive.
Yeah.
And it isn't just one place. We started out being a county-wide organization. Our board represented representatives from South County to North County, and our services, our mobile shower caravan went from North to South County, and provided services, to people where they are. We really need this throughout Humboldt County, and not just one in each location. People really who are houseless here originated here. They have people everywhere, and they would probably, many of them, like to be close to people, but there's nothing there for them. Major access to food and services are in the locations like Eureka and social services. So being able to have a community where that can be provided on site by members of the community, it's really a lot about mutual aid. Yeah. People are not really inclined to want to feel dependent on services. They really like to do things themselves. So wanting to create a community with the other people with whom they live that they've depended on and been surviving in relationship to, still want to do that. Yeah. And that's what Andrew Heben, who is the young planner from Eugene, Oregon, that wrote the book Tent City Urbanism, that's what he experienced when he traveled around the country. Living in homeless encampments. He took the best practices of what made it possible for people to thrive and live together, but they were constantly being uprooted, and how to take that and be able to move people into an opportunity that would give them the legality of being able to stay in community and continue to improve their lives and their communities and all of that. And so we brought him here to tell us about that. This is on AHHA Humboldt. Okay. There's a program. It's a lengthy program, but it's Andrew Heben's presentation when we brought him here in 2014.
Okay, great. And how do you spell Heben? Do you know?
H-E-B-E-N.
Okay, I encourage people to watch that.
Yes.
It sounds like he's the visionary of sorts.
It is. And it's an excellent program. And we're going to put some smaller vignettes of his presentation on our website at some point, or link to it, so that people can get a good dose of that. Yeah. I think it's the state is a problem for us and the definition of housing and shelter, because what the state is willing to fund is related to housing quality standards.
Yeah.
If it isn't brick and mortar and it doesn't meet construction code requirements and all of that, then it's not possible to do. They're not wanting to move in the direction of making those things happen. However, the governor realizes now that we don't have anything between the streets and low-income housing. And in March at Cal Expo, he made a presentation. He brought in all of his people from the state who are responsible for these things, and said he wants cities and counties to work together with their local nonprofits. And sometimes little nonprofits like us don't get any play in the mix because they're so used to dealing in big dollars with big organizations and with developers and so forth. And we're just saying, hey, these things can be done not really with so much expense. It's not going to be expensive no matter what when you start doing something. But the point I'm trying to make is the governor presented 3 counties, San Diego, Sacramento, and Santa Clara, I think it was, with 300 tiny houses each, and he gave a portion of Cal Expo up property-wise for them to step in and start creating a village, because he knows this needs to happen. Now, we're not interested personally in a village of 300 because that's not the kind of community. In Andrew's experience and in our experience of being with people, communities of 25 or 30 people are a good network. They can get a lot of the business of living that needs to get taken care of by distributing the responsibilities. And they know when they were in the Palco Marsh, we did a survey and asked a lot of different groups that were out there, and there were different groups. There were 400 people out there at one point.
I mean, they live in little conclaves.
Right.
They're friends and.
Right, and so we went through and did a survey, and we used to have community conversations where we met with people once a month, and that went on for about 2.5 or 3 years. If you had to choose 25 people that you wanted to live around, do you know who those people are and who would they be? And they knew exactly. And as a sociologist, you could look at that and look at the sociogram, and it's really true that people have those people that work in concert with them. There were the water bearers, the people that did the shopping, the metallurgists, the people who fixed the bicycles, the people that made sure everybody had food, and it was just a community. And we have a few little tiny houses. You showed a picture of them there. When they see those, they're like, oh, I'd love to have a place like that. Then I could have maybe a screen door, and I could see my neighbors go by, and we could talk, and if they needed help, I could help them, and
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, it's like, again, it shows that when people are in a situation like that the larger social body sort of views with, I don't know, skepticism or even prejudice, it's like we forget how human they actually are. And it sounds like with that, the discovery here is that they operate just like a community, and if we set them up in a way where that community can flourish, we can expect better results.
Oh, sure. And we had, we'll still have contractors who would like to work with us to oversee how that happens, but most people are like, just give me a hammer, let me do something. I want to have a garden. I just want to be able to sit on my front porch. I just want to be able to, dig in the dirt. And it's not like different from anybody else, really. It's just that when you're constantly being pushed from one place to another because you have no place to go and there's no place to be safe, warm, and dry. You spend all of your time trying to figure out how to get your needs met and how to live from day to day.
Now you mentioned that sometimes the state rules prohibit setting up these villages for various reasons, whether it's the quality of construction or whatever else. Now, would these CEQA changes help that, or is that totally unrelated?
Well, it's interesting, and I'm glad that you asked, because that's a really important question. CEQA is I'm a fan in many respects because I love the environment, and I think we need to protect that. A lot of these kinds of bills or opportunities to build more have some of those built into them. They have certain rules that you can't damage the environment, you can't pollute the water, whatever. And a lot of times they get a mitigated negative declaration for projects where it's really very iffy. I've been involved in that myself.
It's a negotiation, right, where you're like trade-offs about certain damage you might cause.
Right, but when you know that there's going to be trucks or construction there that's going to have leaky tanks, or there's things that are going to go into the groundwater, or they're going to take some trees out and they're going to destroy habitat, and it's in an area that's been somewhat undisturbed or has been disturbed over time but left intact, so to speak. There are some concerns, and those things are really important to be able to have. But at the same time, when you allow for affordable development or development in general, and people that are finding green spaces to be in because they have no place else to go, one of my concerns is they're going to be pushed out again. They're going to be pushed out again, and none of this is going to address what they need.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, there's worries on both sides. You can think it's going to, look at gentrification. As they start building, it's going to push people who now live in affordable housing out to build something that's going to be more costly, and they're not ever going to afford to live there.
Yeah.
It's at the same time, some of these things, because they're done so quickly and they're just done about, the best bang for the buck, they may become ghettoized.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of things that could happen in the whole scheme of things. But for the most part, you ask a question, what social issues exacerbate the problems?
Yeah.
And there are many. I mean, lack of housing, obviously, but there's so much stigma and stereotyping that goes on. It's
like, I mean, I know everyone, I don't want to use a cliche, but has an uncle or whatever, where it's like, get a job, whatever, and it's like, that's so reductive about what the complexities are of people's lives, their biography, whatever trauma they may have had. It's like,
right. Well, and the
anticipation,
and the anticipation that people should just be able to step into a life and a job and everything else after being homeless, especially chronically homeless, is not realistic at all.
Yeah.
We have to start. And it's just like, I don't think the way that we do things, that we're talking about affordable housing. We should be thinking in terms of the reality of how people are living, and thinking about developing systems to support people in the way that they're living. I'm a member of a coalition that's all about vehicle registry or vehicle tenancy, and people who are actually living in their vehicles. And a lot of people do this, but we haven't legitimized it at all, and we haven't provided ways that would support that. Like, we go out and we empty porta potties all the time. Why couldn't we have services that could go out and help people empty their tanks instead of having them, there's a thousand things that we could do to make our communities more habitable for everyone. And I know it's costly, but look at all the money that's going into
it's costly,
housing.
But then what are the trade-offs?
Yeah.
It's like you may save money in one area, and like I think what you were just saying, it's like we can try to force people to live a certain way that we think is more acceptable than how they're actually living, but then we just miss the problem because they're not changing based on the tut-tuts of whoever's in the administration at the time.
And I think some people think that if we do this long enough, they will just go away, but
that's obviously not work.
And it's never going to happen.
Yeah.
And we're never going to be able to build housing fast enough to keep up with people. But it's morally for us an imperative that we don't leave them on the street. We lose 3 or 4 people to the street every month. And that's been since we started this.
Yeah.
And so that we somehow can't embrace, how can we set up spaces that would allow people to camp legally, to park their cars legally, to have a tiny home village where they can actually be the amazing, smart, innovative people they are, and invite people in to learn from them and to do different things that we do. When it gets down to small footprint, low impact on the environment, a lot of people that I know from outside are probably the most capable of teaching us about how to be light on the planet.
Yeah.
And
that's, I think that in itself is like a perspective change that people haven't made, and I'm glad that you guys are doing that work. Now you guys actually go out and work with people. It's not just a advocacy organization on the governmental level. You guys are intimate with the population. Is that right?
Right. And we have had a lot of work, a lot of time in the chute for policy development. We worked on getting permissions in the housing element for these things. Ordinances were written about them. The ordinances that were written are very restrictive, however, because you have to have security, you have to have fencing, you have to have lighting, you have to, in some of the models, you have to fair wage standards and all that kind of stuff, which for people that just want to help each other, it's really hard to try and manage that. Although there is one in there that we could work with because it's kind of our model, it still is restrictive because it only allows you to do a pilot for 15 people. And 15 people, while that's good, it's not quite the community that people need to be able to.
What is the ideal size then?
Well, the model in Oregon is about 30.
Okay.
And that's been successful. People in encampments, now our encampments are much smaller than they used to be in the sense that people can't gather. You know, they keep getting dispersed.
Yeah.
But when people can gather, there are a lot of jobs that have to get done. You know, if you lived in a community and you had property where you had a garden and you had animals and you had a workshop and you had all maintenance and all those things, there are a lot of jobs to do.
Yeah.
And people are interested in doing them, but there has to be the supportive environment to make that happen.
And that's another way that they can matriculate themselves back into
Sure.
like self-respect
Well,
or self-esteem, right?
And
I mean,
workforce development. There, you know,
Yeah.
I worked at College of the Redwoods for years and worked in a program that was a 2-year certificated program for paraprofessionals who were trained to go into mental health human services, and they were people who were system-wise because they'd been recipients of services.
Yeah.
And so they have a lot of knowledge, they've had a lot of experience, and once they've had an opportunity to process and heal and rest and be in a supportive environment, the trauma that they live with day after day after day, being houseless and being traumatized and re-traumatized, a lot of the issues that people see on the street kind of just fade away. And it help get people connected. And you know, most people want to do the best they can for the place they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And the approach that you're describing to me seems like you start with the sense of optimism about human nature, which I think a lot of people lack these days. And so just the whole, hopeful effort resonates with me. Couple quick things. We have 90 seconds left.
Oh, well.
I know, right? Time limits. What do you think people should understand in our audience that maybe you don't see most people understanding about the homeless? Missed impressions, or what do you think?
Oh my goodness, I think people, because it's just one big ball of yuck, it's a problem, and it's like anything else. A lot of individuals who are human beings that have children, they have parents, they are part of a network that, supports them in some way. That's why they're where they are.
Yeah. And then lastly, you have a website. If people want to give, they can go to your website?
Yes, it's ahha.humco, Humco.
There it is, great.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's ahha-humco.org.
Yeah, and people can go there and find out about your organization. And
Yes,
also
they
find
can.
ways to
They can
give.
check out our website, and they can also sign up to volunteer if they want to be part of our shower program or any of the other activities that we do.
The caravan and whatnot. right?
Yes, we're bringing it back hopefully mid-November. It's been on hiatus.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the work that you do.
Thank you very much.
That's it for this evening. We'll catch you all next week. Stay tuned. Stay informed.